So let's just go over the practical for today, which, as we said, is aperture priority and shutter priority. So carrying through with this, and you'll notice on the practical as it's spelled out that it is targeted specifically and references specifically for students that are in class. For students that are doing this exercise remotely, that are unable or have chosen not to attend class, then you'll have to improvise with some of these requirements, these tasks, just to accommodate it and try to create or simulate the same type of effect that we're doing in class. So in order to, for the graders, the TAs that are going to be grading your assignments, in order for them to have a better understanding of what selection that you have made for your aperture or shutter speeds, we would like you to fill out this form, which, as you can see, it has descriptors as far as what the photo is that you're taking, what mode of the camera that you're using, and what the actual readings were, the aperture and shutter speed that were created during that image. And also the date that photo was taken. So complete this with all of the assigned images that you've taken and submit that with the assignment. So as we go through the list here, again, doing your student identification photo, as you can see, it's referenced in each of the different tasks, whether it AP signifying aperture priority or SP for shutter priority. So the first one is the aperture priority, taking a photograph of your student ID card. The second one is shutter priority, photographing a larger area, interior space, so a larger room, doing it with whatever available light is there. So not using auxiliary light such as a flashlight, turning the lights off and leaving them off, and not using flashlight, not using on-camera or remote flash capabilities. The next one here is shutter priority again, photographing the room with the lights off, one photo with the external flash, and one photo without flash. Again, to show the variance between with and without flash. And again, you have selected a shutter speed, and the camera obviously is going to select the corresponding aperture. So we'd like you to do some experimentation with the various options that are available here. And for instance, when we talk about taking a photograph with the available light and selecting the shutter priority, we want you to look at using various shutter speeds and seeing how the camera will correspond with the appropriate aperture. Because there are tolerances that the camera can function in. If you select for instance, a very quick shutter speed, the camera may not have a full range of aperture settings that will enable a properly exposed image to be created. And likewise, if you extend the shutter speed, then you're going to potentially have issues with movement and whatnot that we need to look at to see how it compares with and without with a faster or slower shutter speed. Obviously, as we've referenced in the lecture, if you are using a slower shutter speed, and I use the example of a 60th of a second, if you are using a shutter speed at a slower rate, a slower speed than a 60th of a second, so a 30th of a second, 15th, and so forth, then you are going to, in all likelihood, have to mount the camera on some type of a stability, whether it be a countertop or the use of a tripod to stabilize the camera to compensate for that movement effect of the camera, because it will pick that movement up at a slower shutter speed than the 60th of a second. So as we're looking at these photos, or at these different tasks before you, we want you to be able to come up with, if it specifies that we're trying to show movement, or we're trying to show a variance in lighting, then that's the expectation of the final photo that's being submitted. But if it just says, for instance, as number 2 explains, shutter priority, what available light is there. You get to select that. We'd like you to play around with the different varying shutter speeds to see the effect that it has with the aperture and to see what the limitations are with the camera, choosing that reciprocal aspect of aperture or shutter speed. So in that case, we would like a properly exposed photo submitted with your selection of shutter priority. So bear that in mind when you're going through the tasks. So carrying on now with with our assignment. So number 4 is aperture priority, photograph a student partner. So obviously remotely, a family member or someone that's within your bubble, and photograph that person 2 meters away in some type of an area that you can create distance. So in a room where you have some physical spacing available. 1 photograph using a wide aperture, and again, a wide aperture would be a lower number on your f-stop, and 1 photo using a small aperture, again, the reverse of having the f number is going to be a higher number, creating a smaller aperture. Number 5, aperture priority. Photograph a student partner standing in front of a window with bright sun backlight, a photo with external flash, a photo without flash, and that photo should demonstrate over and under exposure of subject and or the background. So the camera is, we're trying to trick the camera into looking at whatever area is the light meter is reading in the camera to either a shadow effect that's in a hallway, but having more of a brighter image in the background. So it might be trying to create a properly exposed image if it is referencing, say, a brighter area versus the shadow area. So again, looking at what the camera is actually focusing on as a reference for the light meter that's in the camera. Now, when we're looking at this particular exercise, the external flash is going to compensate for any shadow effect that might be visible. So if you have a larger area in the background that is brighter in nature than where your subject is standing, generally the image is going to appear brighter in the background, shadowing effect, and darker image of your subject. By introducing the external flash, it is going to fill in or accentuate the brightness of that subject that's in the shadowed area. 1 photo without the flash is to demonstrate, again, the extreme, how the camera is operating in either the aperture or the shutter mode to show it's trying to create a properly exposed image, but not necessarily on accurate information. If they may be referencing either extreme brightness or extreme shadow, and not being able to create a proper image from that. So again, looking at the limitations of the exposure of the camera. Number 6, aperture priority. Photographing a shade tree from a sunny location showing both sun and shaded areas. So you'll have to move back a little bit from the tree so that you can see both shade and sunlight. And again, showing how the camera compensates with the shutter speed based on the aperture setting that you select. And again, in that case, you're trying to create a properly exposed image. So if it's referencing a brighter location, and you've selected, for instance, a large aperture, you're allowing a greater volume of light to come into the camera, so the camera is going to compensate, hopefully, by shortening the amount of time that the shutter is allowed to remain open. Number 7, the aperture priority, photographing a student partner standing in shade, in a shadow from a bright location. So here, you are in the bright location, taking a photograph of the student in the shaded area, 1 photo with external flash, 1 photo without flash. And again, to show the flexibility of the camera, what its limitations are in trying to compensate for the reciprocal of whatever, in this case, the aperture, so it's trying to compensate with an appropriate shutter speed. Number 8, shutter priority. Photograph the student partner flapping arms quickly. One photo using a fast shutter speed, one photo with a slow shutter speed. So again, as we discussed, showing that motion to create that blur or movement effect versus taking a photo at a much faster shutter speed and freeze framing and keeping a crystal clear image to eliminate that blurred or motion effect. Number 9, shutter priority. Photographing a student partner jumping using a fast shutter speed. So same kind of idea as the previous one, to try and show the that freeze frame of the student in midair. Number 10, shutter priority. Photograph a student partner running perpendicular to the camera using a slow shutter speed. So you need to have the student in fairly close proximity to where you are, but I would suggest a few meters away, running perpendicular to your position, so running straight across in front of the camera. In that particular case, you're using a slow shutter speed, hopefully to create that blurring effect to show that motion of the student. So as you can see at the bottom here, it talks about examples showing what a large aperture would be. So the number is much lower, but it creates a wider diaphragm, and the smaller one being with the higher number, which is obviously a smaller diaphragm. Shutter priority, as we talked about before, a 60th of a second is normally the threshold for freehand holding of the camera, and then having to stabilize it on a tripod or in some other stationary mode slower than that. So in this exercise, we're trying to show at a 30th of a second versus, in this example, it's just referencing a slow shutter speed versus a fast shutter speed. So 1/250th of a second versus 1/30th of a second. And as we said, the last line here talks about referencing that chart that you're going to use in recording your readings as you take each image for a total of 15 photographs.